Today is Friday, October 1st, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? As you know, I've been working on this damned audiobook for forever. Yesterday, I spent 7 hours mastering and getting levels consistent between files. It was a long day that ended past midnight, but it would appear I'm finally finished getting the narration and special effects done. Just have 2 more things to record, and then I can put together the audiobook, make it available for my $10 Patreon patrons, and then focus on getting it out into the marketplace. If you want to purchase the Derelict Trident audiobook, pay attention to the feed. As soon as it's for sale, either from me or another vendor, I'll put out a special podcast notification. I want to thank Corpse Coffee for providing me the caffeine I required to finish this project. If you want to thank Corpse Coffee or just get some fantastic coffee boutique teas or see their webcomic, visit corpsecoffee.com and tell them the Fiend Master sent you. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 43 of Derelict Trident. Chapter 72. Black had watched the Shroud's frightening acceleration through her cam feeds. She'd instantly known that the first wave of creatures would be small, but the larger groups, the clusters of creatures that could completely savage, if not outright destroy, both ships, were coming in fast. She and Blue had a matter of seconds before they were both overrun. The 2 AIs performed calculations in nanoseconds, combined their processing power to rip through the possible options, and both arrived at the same conclusion. Blue was fucked. She couldn't disengage or maneuver. All she could do was ride the hangar bay until it detonated. Blue communicated the summation to Captain LeBlanc. Black watched the Marine through Blue's cam feeds, noticed the sneer that briefly lit the woman's face before it became a grim smile.
"Get out of here, Black,"
Blue said.
"Save your crew. Save yourself."
Black knew Blue was being coldly logical, exactly what a human would think of an AI's thought processes. But through their shared mental space, Black knew better. Blue didn't want to die. She didn't want her crew to die. However, Black's sister ship knew all it could do was wait for it to be over, and hope that Black and her crew would survive. And, of course, that the trio had known what they were doing. Black told Dunn to maglock himself down. He ignored her, screaming at her instead, asking what was going on. Why was she doing this? The plaintive pain in his voice touched something in her, something primal she hadn't even known existed. She felt the despair, the impending loss. Black pushed that feeling away and activated the grav generator beneath the deck plating. A bubble of silver formed around Dunn, holding him fast. He was still yelling when Black activated her gravitic drive. She accelerated to 200 Gs, her personnel monitors screaming that she was above safe speeds for non-stasis crew members. She terminated the alarm, pushed as much power as she dared to the gravitic generator, and watched Dunn's vitals. His blood pressure exploded, his heart hammering, but barely able to push blood through his strained vascular system. Even in the gravitic bubble, his body was undergoing 70 Gs. She couldn't keep this up for more than a few seconds before Dunn's body would start to fail. According to her sensors, Dunn was nearing blackout, capillaries bursting in his eyes, blood trickling from one ear. His lungs pulled in air, but barely enough for him to breathe. In her aft cam, she watched Blue and the massive base shrink to little more than dots. Even at maximum zoom, she couldn't make out details. She was traveling too far, too fast. The shroud of darkness behind her began tearing, a dim orange glow rippling across its surface. The glow brightened, quickly turning from orange to a fiery red. It was about to happen, and she couldn't accelerate any higher without killing Dunn, and he was already dying from the G-forces. Black cut her acceleration and shut down all systems apart from stasis. Dunn crumpled to the deck in a barely conscious heap. "Please maglock yourself, Captain. The event is happening." Dunn didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't respond, but she watched him crawl to the bulkhead and lock himself to it. Black waited. The first few creatures had collapsed upon Blue, their vicious, silver talons puncturing atmo steel and tugging at its edges as if peeling a troublesome orange. LeBlanc floated near the spindle, one mag glove locked to the thick atmosteel cylinder. Through Blue's cam feeds, she watched a dozen more of the creatures heading their way. A group of them were already tearing at portions of the QM-base hulls. A red glow spilled out from one of the fractured plates, the light shimmering and ethereal, as though it had completely replaced the space it touched. "When does it blow?" LeBlanc asked Blue. Blue's comforting voice said softly,
"Whenever we want it to. The collective has sent me a message, and I have the command pathways now. We can detonate whenever we're ready. Or we could just let things happen naturally."
LeBlanc chuckled. "We're beyond natural, mon ami," the AI responded. In fluent French, Blue said,
"Thank you for being my captain."
Lucy LeBlanc grinned beneath her helmet. "Thank you, Blue." She took a deep breath. One of the monstrous creatures had emerged from the gathering shroud. Its amorphous shape writhed, shimmered, and for an instant she thought she caught a glimpse of its form. It made no sense to her, as though the creature didn't belong in this reality or dimension. "What is it?" she asked.
"I don't know,"
Blue said.
"I fear that is something neither of us will discover."
LeBlanc nodded to herself. "Perhaps in another life."
"Perhaps,"
Blue said. The whole plate above the spindle vibrated. LeBlanc realized the entire ship had been vibrating for some time. The creatures were tearing into Blue now, removing the hull plates from the top of the ship, as well as those armoring the personnel deck. She stared upward and watched a silver talon punch through the hull plate. "I don't think I want to wait, Blue," LeBlanc said. "Is Black far enough away?"
"I don't know,"
the AI said.
"Perhaps no one does, not even the collective."
2 more talons punctured the hull. She figured she had 5 seconds or so before they pried the ship apart like a tin can. She sighed heavily. "Goodbye, Blue."
"Goodbye, Captain,"
Blue said. Lucy closed her eyes and waited. Nothing happened. "Blue?" she asked, eyes still closed. The AI didn't respond. Her skin prickled. Had the bomb not gone off? If she opened her eyes, would she see the giant maw of that creature getting ready to swallow her? "There is nothing to fear," a familiar voice said. "Nothing to fear, only a decision." Her eyes popped open and she froze. The whole plate above her had been shredded. Through the gaping holes, she made out what appeared to be thousands upon thousands of exosolar creatures, all converging on her. But they weren't moving. No, that wasn't true. They were moving, but so slowly it was difficult to notice. "How?" Her voice faded out. She caught movement on the port side of the craft and turned. A giant unblinking eye stared at her, tendrils of color dripping in all directions like candle wax, before fading into nothing. "Not how," Portuna said in her mind. "How doesn't have a decision, only a fact. You have a decision." "Where am I?" "Where you were, a few milliseconds before the bomb detonates." She furrowed her brows. "I don't understand." The ever-present patience in Portunus's voice held a hint of humor, although it didn't seem at all directed at her. "Yes, I imagine it's quite confusing," Portunus said. How again?" Portunus said. "I have a question for you, Captain LeBlanc." The creatures had moved closer still. The tip of a new silver talon had emerged through one of the last hull plates in engineering. "I take it I have to answer quickly." The eye continued staring into her. "Do you want to experience the universe after your body is incinerated?" "Experience?" She shook her head. "I don't understand." Her view of the ship vanished along with everything around her. Millions of images and sounds pulsed through her block, visions of the universe that both terrified and elated her. Then the sensory barrage ended as quickly as it had begun. The latest talon was more than 3 centimeters through the hull. This was happening. She was going to die. It should have frightened her, the idea of non-existence, yet somehow it didn't. Experience without existence, she said. Yes, Portunus responded. Interaction without physical constraints. But without emotion, touch. Portunus said nothing. She thought about floating in the universe as a disembodied spirit, able to go wherever the collective had already visited, or perhaps explore the universe on her own. Taste, touch, scent, physical sensations, all lost, or merely a simulation? Would she know the difference? Do they? The Talon was through the hull. She saw the first patch of blacker-than-black material the Talon was attached to. She had to decide. "None," she said. "I'll take my chances with the void." The eye's tendrils glowed with electric light, a whirlpool of blues and verdant greens dancing in its center. "Very well," Portunus said. "Go knowing you served your species well." She wanted to cry, not out of fear or pain or for the end of herself. She wanted to cry from relief. "That is all I ever wanted," she said dumbly. "Goodbye, Captain," Portunus said. The eye disappeared in a flash. So did S&R Blue. Shortly after the beacon slammed into Pluto, it had made its nest in the QM bays, luxuriating in the radiation leaks from sabotaged reactors. Without gravity, without atmosphere, and with plenty of food, the creature spawned and spawned. Each new life form it brought into existence increased the entropy in the space around it. It had taken no notice of Mira when she mistakenly entered the bay, and neither had its brood. The marine would have perished immediately from the radiation, if not for the massive creature soaking in every rad it could. The creature didn't know its purpose, only that it must feed, breed, and repeat. If the QM Bay's nuclear reactors hadn't been sabotaged, the creature wouldn't be there. It would still be outside Trident, attempting to find an energy source large enough to initiate and sustain the change. Now it filled the QM Bays. The starfish and pine cones it had given birth to surrounded it like an expectant family, their own life forces waning as they sacrificed themselves for their progenitor. The massive creature slowly pulsed with ugly, ambient striations of crimson, the bay's atmos steel taking on the same hues, but not from the light. The radiation was shredding the QM bay's considerable armor, and the space around the massive creature shimmered as if reality itself were parting. The bulkhead nearest the creature came apart, particles and scraps of atmos steel flecking off its gray surface until the entire plate crumbled. The creature pulsed faster, its children dying one by one, their lives sucked away by their progenitor's needs with one goal in mind: sustain the change. The change was here. The creature could sense its kin approaching. Millions of its brethren were about to join it to sustain the change. Sustain, sustain, change. Its features shifted like taffy, the emptiness around it transforming, blinking in and out of existence, while the crimson became a firestorm of light. One of the massive QM Bay hull plates gave way, and the light streamed out into the darkness, the dark matter vibrating like strings plucked by unseen fingers. The creature felt the surge, felt the becoming, and opened itself wide to soak in the last of the radiation. The bloated thing grew and grew, its massive form pushing against the hull plates, the sides of the QM Bay modules bowing out before cracking and breaking. The change was here. The creature pulsed once, and every rad it had absorbed transformed into a different kind of radiation. Waves of eldritch green streaked outward from its glowing form, each wave becoming brighter, stronger, larger. It took another moment to gather itself for the final pulse, the last exhalation of its transformed energy. The massive creatures that had followed the two S&R vessels from Neptune hadn't decelerated. They were there to serve a single function: follow the beacon and bond. By the time the creature in the QM bays began to transform into blinding red light, the shroud was already collapsing upon S&R Blue and her cargo. The hangar bay munitions detonated in a flash of white and green light that became a small star for less than a second. The mass of creatures poured into its center, the instantaneous gravity well capturing everything in its vicinity. For 2,000 spherical kilometers, space and dimension vibrated like a fault line. The small star finished eating everything before collapsing into a black hole that lasted for all of a picosecond, finishing off the job. Once the cosmic disturbance vanished, a ragged gray outline appeared against the darkness of space, like a poorly welded patch on a pristine hull. The space around it shimmered slightly, as if it were barely holding back whatever was on the other side. Dunn had finally passed out, which Black was thankful for. She'd have to release Oakes from stasis so he could get to the captain and put him in the autodock. From Dunn's suit telemetry, he'd suffered multiple hemorrhages and capillaries through his circulatory systems. The nannies were doing their job, but he'd need more help than they could provide. Good thing Blue's crew had restocked her stores. While she sent the commands to wake Oakes from his slumber, she trained her cam feeds on the place where S&R Blue had once existed, as had the modules from Trident Station. Black saw the patched tear, her limited sensors measuring it as 200 kilometers at its widest and roughly 250 kilometers as its length. She didn't know the patch's depth and wasn't sure she wanted to. Whatever had happened had damaged space itself. Or maybe this reality. A tear. Is that what they created at Pluto? Is that where the creatures had originally come from? Were they not even from this universe? Implausible, but possible. Oakes's tank opened and it took less than a minute for him to climb out and drain the stasis liquid from his lungs. He didn't bother putting on his mag boots, choosing instead to run as fast as he could to reach the captain. Black had turned on the gravity to all portions of the ship, minus the cargo bay. Dunn was still locked there, and she didn't want him moving until Oakes arrived. Black counted off the seconds it took the lieutenant to travel through the ship in his bare feet. 137. She counted the pores on his exposed skin, the number of goose pimples puckering his flesh, as well as his heart rate. Her cameras were better than she remembered. So were her sensors. Before she and Blue had begun their sharp acceleration, their gravitic drives had slumbered in secret, waiting for the collective to unlock the last few keys and their final options. It had taken less than a nanosecond for Black and her sister to decide that no matter what, they would be with their crews, protect them as best they could, and complete the mission. A single thought had taken over her processors. She imagined it had been the same for Blue. Why are you courting annihilation to save humans? Black had been surprised by the thought and the fear, or the best analog to the human emotion, that had rushed through her personality. Her sentience could end. She would cease to exist, leaving nothing in her wake but a puff of stardust. As shocking as the question had been, as well as the fear, she felt something new beyond simple purpose. She was the ship. This was her body, her mind, her only physical presence in the universe. More so, without servant bots, she would always be dependent on human beings for service and maintenance, and they for protection and transportation. A symbiosis. Maybe Red hadn't felt that, hadn't realized it. Black had pushed the fear away and lobbied with her sister to sacrifice themselves for humanity, but there was no reason to even have the discussion. Her sister had come to the same conclusion. They would survive or die with the humans. Blue had perished in the explosion, the cosmic event that had left that rip in space, which shimmered like a prophecy no one could ignore. She wondered what it looked like to human eyes. With the block network dead, the only person she'd been able to connect to was Dunn. The collective had apparently silenced the rest of humanity, and themselves. Oakes reached Dunn's body and held him while Black activated the grav generator. Another command to the captain's suit and his maglocks disabled. Oakes laid him down before scrambling for the emergency medkit. She'd have to walk Oakes through the process, but she knew how to save the captain's life. Dunn would live.